move on to segment 2. Maybe we should call this one, Cedric, Say What? I don't know if we've done a Say What segment in a while, but
it's been a minute.
This seems to fit because your friend and mine, Baker Mayfield, I say that tongue-in-cheek, but Baker Mayfield doing an extended interview and piece with GQ magazine, and some of that starting to come out and make big waves. Probably the biggest of them was what Baker Mayfield, former Oklahoma quarterback, now leading the Cleveland Browns, what he had to say about Daniel Jones, the recently drafted New York Giants quarterback. I don't know if Baker Mayfield's not making any friends in the New York City area. It's going to be tough sledding whenever he has to go to New York, to the New York area to play. He did not speak kindly about Daniel Jones or about the Giants.
The question is, why is Baker talking about other quarterbacks? What are you doing?
Why are you
Baker?
picking on Daniel Jones?
Why do you care when Daniel Jones was drafted? What if Daniel Jones said you were undersized and shouldn't have been drafted number 1 overall? Daniel Jones not speaking on you. Why are you speaking on Daniel Jones? Baker doesn't have a filter. And I think to be an NFL quarterback, eventually you're going to have to figure out that whatever you say is going to be magnetized 1,000 times exponentially. People hinge on every word you say. And so as the face of a franchise, and the Cleveland Browns are trying to come up out of the doldrums and get after teams like Pittsburgh and Baltimore and Cincinnati in the AFC North. If you want to get after those teams, don't give people ammunition to come after your knees on a blitz. I don't even know if they play the Giants this year, but I guarantee you they're going to play them sometime during Baker's career. And if you're the leader of a locker room and Baker has the respect of the players in that locker room, don't make it harder on yourself. I know that he was being candid and answering questions honestly, but you got to be smarter about what you say in a national publication. Daniel Jones surprised a lot of us by being drafted. I think it was 5th overall by the New York Giants. But let Daniel live. Let Daniel get his money. We don't need to know what Baker Mayfield thinks about a colleague. You never heard Peyton Manning ripping into Tom Brady. You don't hear Drew Brees ripping into Romo or anything, or Kirk Cousins or anybody like that. There's a fraternity. Those quarterbacks have a fraternity. And that fraternity is a one of respect because, number one, those guys don't have to play against one another. They'll never have to tackle one another. So it's the highest paid position. It's the most profitable position, the most lucrative position in the NFL. And with it comes a certain set of responsibilities. And I think Baker needs to be a little bit more responsible.
You know, I think about it from Daniel Jones's perspective. He woke up, Monday morning, and, he's just going about his business, and all of a sudden he finds himself in the middle of a firestorm involving a guy that, maybe he's met Baker Mayfield, but
who knows?
Who knows? It had to have been sort of a, Twilight Zone moment for Daniel Jones to find himself in the middle of this. But, it's also interesting the fact that, Baker Mayfield's been a guy who's really made a career out of being, expected not to be able to do X, Y, Z. He wasn't supposed to be able to become the starter at Texas Tech as a walk-on. He wasn't supposed to be able to transfer to Oklahoma and become a starter. He wasn't supposed to be a Heisman Trophy winner or a first-round pick in the draft. And yet he's basically lambasting, a guy that is trying to do what people don't think he can do. So there are ways that he could have made his point talking about, because I think he did have an interesting point, the whole notion that sometimes these NFL teams do get a little too caught up in things that, the minutia of a guy, his height, or,
measurables.
The measurables, exactly, Cedric. So I think he had a point in some of that, but at the same time, you don't have to bring up a guy. You don't have to throw a single individual player or franchise, a franchise that may well, be providing your paycheck one day. You don't have to take that step and cause that problem. You can make that point without calling somebody out. So, again, I think it's sort of, we've talked about Baker before too, Cedric, because, I know that the Browns are ecstatic about the potential of him, the excitement this season. But don't you think somewhere in their heart of hearts they're thinking, man, could we have the good stuff and leave this behind? Isn't there a point that they have to sort of be asking Baker Mayfield to tone it down a little bit?
You know they have. I mean, why wouldn't they? You've given this guy a lot of money. You've entrusted him with being the face of your franchise. You know the past. You've heard about the stories of him getting into the Kansas fans and planting the flag in Columbus, and then coming out and saying the Sooners, the SIDs made me apologize. Those are the kind of things that give you pause and make you want to second guess your decision. The only thing that I can say about it, Jen, is this: that boy can play football, and at the end of the day, that's the most important thing, is that he can play football. But don't make it so hard on yourself.
Yeah.
If you start to make yourself out to be public enemy number one, you can't be sorry. You can't be questioning why a defensive end hit you in the knees on a blitz. So to me, I think he needs to respect the game a little bit more, respect the position a little bit more, and respect that fraternity of quarterbacks a little bit more, or things are going to get a lot harder for him. He already has to play Pittsburgh twice a year and Baltimore twice a year. Why are you adding to that load?
Yeah, and I think it's interesting too. You bring up some of the comments that Baker made in that GQ story about the planting the flag and the apology after the Ohio State game last year. And people that were very supportive of him, he didn't necessarily name them, but when he's talking about leaders at OU, that would be Lincoln Riley, that would be athletic director Joe Castiglione, potentially university president at the time, David Bourne, men that were supportive of him, Lincoln Riley naming him the starter when he was the offensive coordinator. There were other instances, the arrest in the offseason, that they very much stood beside him in some instances. And after the flag planting happened, you had the whole incident at Kansas, and they also stood by him then. And here Baker is coming out and saying, he was embarrassed for them to tell me to apologize. He issued that apology apparently to Daniel Jones, but for people that have been some of his biggest supporters, he's not exactly, being that friendly with them either. It just, again, I think that you're right, Cedric. If you're going to, if you're gonna make enemies with your, conference rival, okay, I guess. But when you can't even make nice with people that are good to you, I don't know if I quite understand what's happening there.
He's a complex cat. He's painting himself into a corner. What's going to happen, Jen, is in 2 or 3 years, with a couple of Pro Bowls under his belt, because these older quarterbacks can't play forever. Brady and Rivers and Big Ben, those guys can't play forever. And Baker and Dak Prescott, who, by the way, is the epitome of what you want representing your organization, just a sharp dude who's classy and never puts his foot in his mouth. But those are the guys that are going to be leading this next crew of quarterbacks: Sam Darnold, Josh Rosen, all of those guys. So Baker is right there at the head of that class, but he's going to have to learn that it's not always all about ability. It's also how you conduct yourself in front of the media, in front of the fans, in organizational activities, all of that. The camera's always on you. You're not just representing the Mayfield family anymore. You're representing the Cleveland Browns. That's a big deal.